In the northeastern regions, there is a kind of food that everyone knows, yet few truly understand. It is called golden sticky rice. Freshly taken out of the steamer, it glows with warmth and fragrance, soft and tempting. To most people, it is nothing more than a simple rural delicacy, but among the elders, there is an unspoken fear attached to it. Golden sticky rice holds heat in a way ordinary food does not. If it is suddenly plunged into cold water, the outside cools instantly, while the inside remains scorching hot. When eaten, the mouth feels no pain at first. There is no warning, no burning sensation. Only after it dissolves inside the stomach does the true danger reveal itself. By then, the damage has already been done. The pain comes from within, violent and unbearable, leaving no chance for survival. This secret was known only to a few, and it was this knowledge that quietly opened the door to disaster. Everything began with a dream. That morning, the old woman was steaming golden sticky rice at home. As the steam rose and filled the room, she felt drowsy and slipped into a half-conscious state. In her dream, a golden weasel circled around her, its eyes sharp and unnatural, its body moving with eerie intelligence. She felt uneasy and instinctively reached for a stone, preparing to drive it away. Before she could act, loud barking erupted from the courtyard. The sudden noise jolted her awake. Still shaken by the dream, she stepped outside and discovered that a thief had been caught, his body stuck in a dog hole in the wall. Her husband and several neighbors had already surrounded him. The thief struggled, cursed, and begged, but there was no sympathy in the crowd. Times were dangerous. Bandits were rumored to be roaming nearby, and suspicion ruled over mercy. Her husband spoke calmly, almost casually. He told her to bring out a bowl of freshly steamed golden sticky rice and another bowl of cold water. The neighbors tied the thief firmly, preventing any escape. The old woman hesitated for a brief moment, but she said nothing and followed his instructions. The rice was dipped into the cold water and then fed to the thief spoon by spoon. The man swallowed greedily, even laughing at first, mocking their attempt to scare him. He had no idea what he was eating. By the time the women turned away, unwilling to watch any longer, the thief's laughter had turned into screams. The sound that followed was something the old woman would never forget. It was not a scream of fear, but of agony, raw, broken, and desperate. The cry tore through the courtyard and echoed in her ears long after it ended. When it was finally over, silence fell like a heavy curtain. A human life had been extinguished, not by blade or rope, but by food. The act felt clean, almost bloodless, yet the sin it created was far from light. That night, the killing bore its first fruit. As the old couple lay in bed, faint crying drifted in from outside. The sound was low, distant, and mournful, like a funeral lament carried by the wind. The old woman peered through the window and froze. In the courtyard stood an elderly woman with a sharp, almost animal-like face, dressed in white mourning clothes. She asked in a hollow voice whether anyone had seen her grandson. Terrified, the old woman screamed and woke her husband. When he gathered his courage and lit the oil lamp, he saw something even more unsettling. Several old women were kneeling in the yard, bowing toward the dog hole in the wall, crying as if performing funeral rites for the thief who had died that very day. The doors and windows were shut tightly. Neither of them slept until dawn. By morning, the courtyard dog was dead, its body reduced to nothing but bones. Fear finally overcame hesitation. The husband decided they could no longer handle this alone. He prepared offerings and went to seek a man named Liu Shuqing, a well-known practitioner living near Mount Nianzi. Liu Shuqing came from a family rumored to possess ancient divination knowledge passed down through generations. When the husband finally found him, Liu was drunk beyond recognition. With no better option, he brought the man back home and waited. That night, the crying returned, stronger than before. The old woman felt as if her head were splitting apart. Just as despair peaked, Liu suddenly sat up and shouted into the darkness, commanding the unseen to leave. The oppressive presence vanished instantly. He handed them a talisman and instructed them to place it on the window. At dawn, Liu sobered up and agreed to investigate. They went to the river where the thief's body had been discarded. Liu examined the corpse and immediately sensed something was wrong. A person killed by internal burns should have a swollen abdomen. Instead, the body was sunken. When Liu tore open the clothing, the truth was revealed. Inside the hollowed abdomen lay a golden weasel, over a meter long, curled tightly within. Its head was clamped around the corpse's throat, forming a horrifying image. Liu explained that the weasel had already cultivated spiritual intelligence. Unable to fully transform into human form, it used corpses as vessels, controlling them from within. The thief had not been chosen at random. He had become a substitute body, a sacrifice. When the weasel was killed along with him, its hatred did not vanish, it multiplied. Golden weasels, Liu said, are notorious for revenge. Once they mark someone, the grudge does not end with one life. It carries on for 3 generations. If revenge cannot be fulfilled in the present, it will fall upon the children, and then the grandchildren, until blood answers blood, or the lineage ends. This was not merely haunting, it was a debt carved into fate itself. After revealing the truth, Liu Shuqing did not immediately speak of destruction. Instead, he sat silently for a long time, staring at the river as if weighing something far heavier than the corpse before him. Finally, he explained that there were only 2 ways to deal with the golden weasel's vengeance. The first was absolute extermination, using severe rituals to sever the karmic thread entirely. But such a method would not only erase the weasel's spirit, it would also consume the life force of the caster. Liu made it clear that whoever performed this ritual would not live long afterward. The second option was negotiation. The weasel, though an evil spirit, was not mindless. It understood loss, lineage, and debt. If its resentment could be soothed, if its death were acknowledged and honored, it might accept restraint instead of total annihilation. But this solution was fragile. It would not erase the karmic debt. It would merely delay its collection. The old couple chose the second path. A small ancestral tablet was erected for the weasel, hidden away from public sight. Offerings were made regularly, not with devotion, but with fear and obligation. Liu also prepared a protective talisman, sealing part of the resentment within it. He instructed that the talisman must be kept dry, intact, and passed down to the youngest member of the family. It was not a blessing, he warned, but a lock. For many years, the house remained peaceful. Children were born. The old couple aged. The village changed. Whispers of weasels and golden rice faded into stories told only on cold nights. Even Liu Shuqing himself grew weaker with time, his hair turning white faster than it should have. He never returned to the mountain. When he died, people said his life had been shortened by decades. The debt, however, was not forgiven. It was only waiting. Generations later, the talisman had become little more than a family heirloom, its true purpose forgotten. The warnings were repeated, but without fear behind them. To the youngest descendant, it was merely an old object wrapped in cloth. One summer afternoon, while playing near the river, the child slipped and fell into the water. By the time he was pulled out, soaked and trembling, the talisman had been drenched through. The ink bled, the symbols blurred, the lock was broken. That night, the child developed a high fever. His body burned while his limbs remained icy cold. He muttered incoherently, whispering about water, about hands pulling him downward. Near midnight, his breathing slowed until it almost stopped. In desperation, the family carried him to the riverbank, following a folk belief that returning the afflicted to the place of origin might restore balance. As his feet touched the water, something pulled back. The adults felt it clearly, a sudden force dragging him toward the river. They lost their grip. The child disappeared beneath the surface without a splash. When his eyes opened again, he was no longer in the world of the living. He stood in a dimly lit street, under a sky without stars. The air was heavy, thick with silence. Before him stood a building with a flickering sign, half step. In. People entered and exited, but none cast shadows. Their faces were pale, expressionless, as if carved from wax. Inside, the rules were simple and terrifying. No one could stay more than one night. Anyone who did would never return. As panic set in, a familiar voice called out to him. An old man sat at the corner table, dressed in worn Daoist robes, his face stern but not unkind. He introduced himself as the 9th uncle, once a Daoist practitioner who died young, before completing his teachings. His soul lingered here, bound by unfinished duty. The 9th uncle explained everything. The golden weasel's resentment had finally broken free. The child had crossed the boundary of life, not by accident, but by inheritance. He was paying for a debt incurred long before his birth, but because he arrived unwillingly, the laws of the underworld still allowed a path back. If someone could guide him, there was a price. The 9th uncle offered to teach him fragments of the 3 pure ones. Path, a lineage long thought lost. In return, the child would carry the responsibility forward, not as a victim, but as a bearer of balance between worlds. Lessons were taught in whispers and symbols, carved into memory rather than written. The child learned chants that steadied the soul, seals that marked the living, and the unspoken rule above all others. Power exists not to dominate fate, but to endure it. Before dawn, a golden rooster crowed. The 9th uncle urged him to leave. As the child ran toward the sound, pale hands reached out from the darkness, trying to pull him back. The resentment had noticed him. With the last strength of the teachings, he broke free. He awoke on the riverbank, gasping for air, surrounded by crying relatives. He had returned, but something had changed. From that day forward, shadows lingered where they should not. Dreams carried voices not his own. And deep within him, a path had been opened, one that could never be closed again. The debt was no longer hidden. It had found its inheritor. Life did not return to normal after the debt was settled. From the outside, everything appeared ordinary. He attended classes like everyone else, sat in crowded lecture halls, and walked through familiar campus streets lined with trees and noise. Yet beneath the surface, nothing was the same. While other students complained about exams and deadlines, he quietly marked days that were spiritually unstable, nights when the boundary between worlds thinned without warning. In classrooms, he often sensed presences lingering near the back rows, faint, curious, never hostile, but watching. During late-night study sessions, he sometimes heard footsteps pacing the corridor long after the building had closed. When he turned to look, there was never anyone there. He learned not to react. Examinations remained a persistent obstacle. Despite his preparation, results never matched effort. Each failure felt less like chance and more like a reminder. The path he carried did not align with conventional success. While others moved forward through grades and certificates, he stood still, suspended between worlds that demanded different currencies. Eventually, he stopped fighting it. Relationships fared no better. He once tried to hold on to something normal, a quiet romance built on shared meals, laughter, and small promises. But secrecy erodes intimacy. He could not explain why certain nights he vanished without explanation, or why fear crossed his face at sounds no one else heard. The breakup was gentle but final. "You're always somewhere else," she said. She was right. Not long after, the signs returned. It began subtly. Stray animals gathered outside his building, sitting in unnatural stillness. A mirror in his room cracked overnight without cause. During a thunderstorm, the lights flickered, and for a brief moment, he saw unfamiliar symbols reflected in the glass. The ninth uncle did not appear. Instead, the silence spoke, louder. Something new was forming, something older than the golden weasel, yet bound by similar laws. Not revenge this time, but imbalance. A disturbance spreading outward, touching lives unaware of its source. One evening, as he walked home, a child stopped him on the street. "Are you the one who listens?" the child asked, eyes too knowing for his age. Before he could answer, the child was gone. That night, he prepared his tools again. The chance felt heavier, more deliberate. This was no inherited debt, this was an invitation. The path ahead was no longer about settling the past, it was about facing what came next. And so a new chapter begins, one not bound by family history alone, but by a widening shadow that reaches beyond a single bloodline. What waits ahead will not announce itself with legends or warnings. It will arrive quietly, disguised as coincidence, tragedy, or chance. Those who hear it will not understand, but he will. And if you wish to follow this journey into the unseen rules that govern our world, into stories where every choice leaves a mark, remember to subscribe and stay with the channel. There are paths that only reveal themselves step by step, and what comes next has already begun to stir. Stay alert, and we'll see you in the next story.